The cellkeeper growled low, cleaning his teeth with a piece of human bone when I pushed the meal cart down the underground corridor. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, carved into layers of iron and stone, each glowing faintly as if repelling the very darkness. I stopped in front of the reinforced door of cell 13 and took a deep breath. It was always like this. Each delivery felt like a slow fall in the stomach, as if my body knew I was facing something that should not exist. "Coffee time, Dargoth." My voice echoed through the intercom, hoarse and tired. Inside the cell, the giant moved. The cold light reflected off his dry skin, tough as burnt leather. Black chains bound his wrists and ankles, each link etched with forgotten prayers, older than any religion still practiced on the surface. He lifted his eyes, pupils as deep as bottomless pits. His voice vibrated in the concrete, deep like a dying engine on a cold morning. "I don't sleep, Elias." The words came slowly. "I only wait, and in each wait, I imagine how I'll tear you to pieces when these chains give way." I slid the steel tray through the security compartment. A mechanical ritual. It was better not to think. 18 ways to kill me, I replied calmly, if you include that one with the pruning shears. A metallic sound filled the space. It wasn't exactly laughter, but something between broken gears and iron scraping glass. Dargoth was almost 4 meters tall. If he wanted, he could touch the floor without bending his back. Even shackled, the space seemed too small to contain his body. I had been feeding creatures like him for 3 years. Before that, I was a cook in a decaying restaurant in rural England. I never imagined my skills with trays, schedules, and complaints would lead me to work for the Order of the Veil. "What do we have today?" Dargoth asked, leaning over the food. "The usual. Powdered eggs, tasteless toast, watered-down orange juice. No meat." He sniffed as if recognizing the lie he had already memorized. "It's yellow-painted paper." "Correct." I crossed my arms. "Real food gives strength, and no one here wants to see you stronger." Dargoth slammed his head against the wall and smiled with his stained teeth. "At least you're honest. The other feeders tried to say this was for our own good. How many caretakers have come before me?" I asked. 8. One of them lasted only 2 days. His eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Do you know what happened?" I shook my head. One of the prisoners found out his daughter's name. It was enough to break the poor man's mind. I mentally noted review my personal security measures. "Did any of them get devoured?" "Just one." Dargoth licked his lips. "Brother Jonathan." He got too close to Vornak's bars. Didn't make it to the emergency button before his head was ripped off. I swallowed hard and continued my shift. The complex had 10 underground levels, but each descent felt like diving into a darker ocean. The 7th level housed the less dangerous ones, spirits that enjoyed corrupting mediocre politicians or bankers. They weren't harmless, but they had already been domesticated by the boredom of imprisonment. Further below, on the 8th level, were the true monsters. Creatures whose names had been erased from books, but not from the memories of the priest who still trembled in silence when mentioning them. In cell 81, I found Kalian, known as the Duke of Masks. He looked like a well-dressed executive, until you looked closer and realized the skin he wore wasn't his. In the next cell, 82, lay Avelra. At first glance, she seemed like a woman of almost supernatural beauty. Only when someone stared into her eyes did they realize her pupils were portals to places that should never be seen. And in cell 83 was Lorien, my favorite prisoner. He looked like an aging professor in a tweed jacket, thick glasses, and a cultured air that clashed with the hell surrounding him. He was always reading books, and no matter where they came from, he seemed to have access to titles that didn't even exist anymore on the surface. Elias, punctual as always. He carefully closed the book. "What have you brought me today?" "Porridge, dry toast, coffee without sugar." "Magnificent." He smiled, accepting the tray as if it were a banquet. That was Lorien's trick. He was a demon of knowledge, of erudition. He could turn any conversation into a lesson. "Have you reflected," he said between sips, "why the Order insists on feeding us, even with substitutes?" "To keep you all locked here." I shrugged. "Without food, you would return to wherever you came from." "Exactly." He wiped his mouth with an invisible napkin. "A demon without nourishment loses form, evaporates back to its dimension. And how can we study it after that? The answer sounded obvious, but it still bothered me. I continued my rounds. In cell 87, there was Seraphine, a standing wolf captured after possessing an entire seminary in Prague. The exorcism took months and left 2 priests catatonic. The nun was here earlier, she said, sniffing the air. Smells like fear. You smell like ashes and surrender. Excellent analysis. I slid the food. Seraphine watched me with the eyes of a predator. 37 years in this cubicle. Always the same promises of sentence reduction. None fulfilled. Any chance of release? None. The order doesn't release anyone. They study us until we dry up, then perform the final destruction. That phrase chilled me. Final destruction. It wasn't banishment. It wasn't a return to hell. It was absolute erasure. In cell 89, I found the veteran, Azeroth, lion-headed humanoid body, imprisoned since the 17th century. 4 centuries chained. He didn't touch the tray. He just looked at me. How long have you worked here? 3 years. 412. His voice seemed to drag centuries of pain. Do you know what I've learned in all that time? That suffering is the only constant. The rest, pleasure, faith, hope, are just distractions. I stood still, not knowing how to respond. You think you feed prisoners, Elias, but you don't. He leaned his face against the bars. You feed a torture machine. Those words kept echoing in my mind as I descended to the 9th level, where the 3 most valuable prisoners were kept. One of them was mine. The name he used was Malric. His cell was different. Bigger, with real bookshelves, comfortable furniture, and even porcelain. Malric was a demon of information. In exchange for secrets, he received privileges. Elias, always so proper. He accepted the false dish as if it were a delicacy. I have something to tell you. About the man who did your job before you. My hand froze in the air. What about him? The order said he died of a heart attack. But it wasn't that. He was murdered by someone from inside here. My stomach churned. Lies. Malric leaned forward, eyes sparkling with amusement. If you can't trust demons, and you can't trust the order, tell me, Elias, who can you trust? The iron doors slammed shut behind me, and I realized his question would echo in my mind for a long time. On the surface, I lived like an ordinary employee. I had a small apartment, a broken clock on the wall, and neighbors who would never imagine where I spent my nights. To them, I was just a displaced cook, someone who had grown tired of the routine and was looking for another obscure job. But the truth was that when I descended in the armored elevator of the Order of the Veil, I became something else, the guardian of the condemned's meals. During the day, I tried to forget. I walked around the market, bought fruits, read old newspapers on the park bench. But at night, the call came back. It always came back. That week, I received different instructions. Normally, I would just deliver food, make notes, and keep my distance. But now my superiors wanted me to spend more time in levels 8 and 9. Behavioral observation, they called it. The term seemed innocent enough, but we all knew it only meant more risks. On the night of the change, I noticed something was wrong as soon as I entered the hallway. The air was heavier, charged with static electricity. The lights flickered in sequence as if something invisible moved between them. When I stopped in front of Kalian's cell, the Duke of Masks, I noticed his suit was cleaner than usual. It seemed like he'd received special treatment. Did you hear, Elias? He said, pressing his face against the bars. The order is going to transfer some of us. Transfer to where? I asked, suspicious. To experiments. He smiled, his teeth too white. Do you think the final destruction is worse than being used as a lab rat? I didn't answer. In Avelra's cell, I found a more disturbing scene. She was sitting, motionless, staring at the opposite wall. Her pupils spun like miniature whirlpools. Are you okay? I asked. I heard the screams, her voice sounded distant. On level 10. A chill ran down my spine. Level 10 was off limits even for us, trusted staff. Only high-ranking members of the Order had access. I continued the rounds, my steps heavier, until I found Lorien again. He was reading a volume so old the cover seemed made of dried skin. Ah, Elias. He closed the book as if hiding a secret. What do you know about the origin of the Order? Just the basics, I shrugged. It was founded to contain creatures like you. That's what they say. His eyes glinted behind the lenses. But what if I told you that we created the Order? I laughed nervously. You? Yes. He took a sip of the watery coffee. Some of us needed humans willing to serve, study, and record. We created the Order so our imprisonment would look like their project. Deep down, it's a mutual arrangement. I didn't answer. I just noted it down in my notebook, as I always did. In cell 87, Seraphine was different. She usually spoke little, always skeptical. But now she seemed agitated, her claws scraping the stone floor. You need to know. She looked around, as if someone might be listening. The Order isn't just studying us. They are fusing us, mixing essences, crossing horrors to create something new. You're making things up, I said, though my voice didn't sound as firm as it should have. Think. She moved closer to the bars. Why would they keep so many of us alive if they can't release us? We're not prisoners. We're raw material. Her words stuck in my mind like oil. When I reached cell 89, I found Azeroth quieter than usual. The old lion seemed tired, his eyes sunken as if some of his energy had been drained. They took me yesterday, he spoke bluntly. Used different chains. Profiled my blood. Sang chants I don't recognize. And what happened? I got weaker. He lowered his head. They're draining what's left of us. With each cell, the weight of the truth grew heavier. But it was only in front of Malric that things took a definitive turn. He was waiting for me with a sharp smile, sitting in his upholstered chair like an aristocrat at a tea table. Elias, I have good news. They don't sound good. For you, perhaps not. He tilted his head. The Order is getting ready to open level 10. And guess who will be the first human allowed in? My body froze. Lie. Malric rested his hands on his lap. No demon lies all the time. Some of us only tell the convenient part. Why me? He smiled as if savoring an irony. Because you're already broken inside. That night, when I returned to my apartment, the silence felt different. The stopped clocks, the shadows in the corners of the room, everything seemed to be watching me. I grabbed a bottle of cheap whiskey and drank straight from the neck, trying to drown out the echoes of voices. But Malric's words, Seraphine's Azeroths, mixed together like a chorus. You feed the machine. You are part of it. You will be used. And then, for the first time in 3 years, I dreamed. I dreamed that I descended to level 10. The doors opened, and at the end of the corridor, something was waiting for me. The dreams wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the same damp, endless corridor, with iron doors pulsing like living flesh. Something was calling me from the other side. Not a sound, but a presence, as if my own body was being drawn forward against my will. During the day, I tried to ignore it. I went shopping, cooked, read the newspaper. But even the sound of the kettle whistling in the kitchen felt like the dragging hiss of chains. The following night, the summons came officially. I received a black envelope sealed with red wax. The symbol of the Order was stamped on the front, an open eye inside a broken triangle. Inside, only a few words. Elias, prepare for descent to level 10, irrevocable order. My stomach twisted. Upon arrival, the corridors were quieter than usual. Order guards dressed in tactical armor and silver masks surrounded the entrance to the elevator. None of them looked me in the eye. The supervising officer was Prelate Marcus, a tall, bald man with a stern gaze. He handed me a reinforced uniform and a metal cross to hang around my neck. This will protect you, he said, emotionless. From what exactly? I asked. He didn't answer. He just signaled for me to enter the elevator. The descent seemed endless. The display passed from level 9 to empty space. With every meter, the air grew colder, denser, as if we were sinking into an invisible ocean. Finally, the doors opened. Level 10 wasn't like the others. There were no aligned cells, no straight corridors. It was an open, circular space like an inverted cathedral. The walls were covered with symbols I didn't recognize, etched into black stone that seemed to absorb the light. In the center, there were giant glass tanks, filled with a greenish liquid. Inside them, bodies, not whole demons, but parts. Arms with claws, eyes that moved on their own, bones sewn with cables. My entire body froze. What is this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Marcus stepped closer, hands crossed. Research. The Order seeks to understand what you call evil, and when possible, use it. Use it? I repeated, incredulous. He looked at me as if I were an innocent child. The world on the surface is becoming less safe, Elias. There are wars, plagues, collapses. If we can transform demonic essence into something controllable, we might be able to protect humanity. I looked back at the tanks. One of the floating eyes pressed against the glass following me. There was nothing controllable there, only hunger. As I observed, I noticed another detail. Some iron cells were embedded in the opposite wall. Unlike the ones in the upper levels, these were translucent, made of a material that resembled dark crystal. Inside one of them, a silhouette watched me. It wasn't as massive as Dargoth, nor as refined as Malric. It was different. The figure sat motionless, but its presence filled the entire space. I couldn't make out a face, only a cloak of shadows that seemed to breathe. "Who is that?" Marcus hesitated. It was the first time I saw insecurity on his face. "That's the Primordial, the oldest of them all, captured centuries ago. He never speaks, never accepts food. He just waits." I felt the same chill I had in my dreams. It was him, the one who had been calling me every night. The figure turned its head toward me. I should have backed away, but my legs moved me closer. A deep sound like distant thunder echoed inside my mind. "Elias." I almost fell to my knees. "He spoke to me," I whispered. Marcus turned pale. "That's impossible." The voice returned, not in words but in pulses of meaning directly in my mind. "You are the key. You are the bearer. When the seal breaks, it will be by your hands." My eyes burned. I gripped the cross on my chest, but it felt like a worthless toy. "We need to leave." Marcus pulled me by the arm, hurried. "You've seen enough." As we returned to the elevator, I still felt its presence inside me, as if it had left an echo burning behind my eyes. That night, in my apartment, things got worse. The broken clock started working again, but the hands were moving backward. The walls creaked as though they were breathing. And in the mirror, I saw something impossible. For a moment, my reflection smiled on its own, even though my mouth was still. I grabbed the phone to call my contact at the order. The line was filled with static, and then his voice returned, deep, echoing as if from underground. "You've already started to change." I threw the device against the wall. The silence didn't last long. Someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks. When I opened it, no one was in the hallway. Just an envelope identical to the one I had received before. Inside, a handwritten note. "Don't trust the order. Don't trust us. Find the truth on your own." The signature at the end was impossible. It was from Lorien. For days I carried Lorien's note in my pocket as if it were a secret weapon. Each time I touched it, I felt a strange weight, as if the letters had been written with ink made of ancient blood. The order couldn't know I had it. If they found out, I would disappear like the other feeders, but doubt had already consumed me. What did Lorien know? Why would he risk so much to warn me? The following night, I returned to work as if nothing had changed. I followed the usual routine: fake trays, short conversations, apathetic notes. But inside, I was boiling. When I arrived at Lorien's cell, he was already waiting for me with that same tired professor's smile. "I see you received my message," he said quietly. I looked around. Cameras blinked in every corner. "Why did you do this?" "Because you are different, Elias," he tilted his head. "The Order needs someone like you, and so do we." "We?" I whispered. "Those of us who still remember who we are." He leaned his hands on the bars. "What you saw in Level 10 isn't just research. It's preparation. They don't want to destroy us, they want to use us." My heart raced. "Use us for what?" "To defeat death itself." Lorien smiled bitterly. "The prelate and the others believe they can merge with us. Not as prisoners, but as successors. Hybrid beings, half human, half eternal." I swallowed hard. The memory of the tanks came back with full force. "And the Primordial?" I risked. He called me by name. For a moment, Lorien's face hardened with seriousness. "Then it's confirmed. He chose you." "Chose me for what?" "To open the door that should never have been opened." In the next cell, Seraphine seemed restless. She sniffed the air as I approached. "You went down there, didn't you?" I didn't respond. "I can smell it on you." She pressed her snout against the bars, her eyes gleaming. "If you continue, you won't come back human." I continued my rounds, but every sentence from the prisoners ate away at me. Even Azeroth, the old lion, said something unusual. "Be careful, Elias." His voice sounded almost fatherly. "The Order believes it controls the game, but they're just pieces on his board." I quickened my pace. I needed to reach Malric. He received me as always, polished, comfortable, with a glass of wine that didn't really exist. "So, you saw what's hiding at the bottom of the house?" he asked. "You already knew," he laughed quietly. "Of course. But isn't it fascinating? So many centuries of imprisonment, and in the end we're just steps toward something greater. The Primordial. What is he?" Malric raised his gaze, serious for the first time. "He's not one of us." His voice came out like poison. "He's the void before us. The original darkness from which even demons were born." My blood ran cold. "And why speak to me?" "Because you no longer fully belong to your side." Malric lifted his glass. "Believe me, Elias, it's not about choosing between us or the Order. It's about choosing whether you want to exist in the tomorrow that comes." That night, I woke up to footsteps in the corridor of my building. I got up, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and waited. But there were no intruders, only a reflection in the bathroom mirror. This time, the reflection didn't just smile. It spoke. "It's time." I screamed, throwing the knife at the glass, but the mirror didn't break. It only reflected my own face, exhausted and terrified. The following night, I was summoned again to level 10. The central circle was prepared. Symbols glowed on the floor like embers in a fire. The tanks had been emptied, the creatures consumed in the ritual. Marcus was there, along with other prelates. They all wore red robes and carried curved blades. "Elias," Marcus approached, "your time has come." "What will happen to me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You will open the seal. The Primordial chose you." He smiled like someone speaking of a prize. "And together we will inherit his power." My feet faltered. I wanted to step back, but soldiers surrounded me. The crystal cell opened. The Primordial rose, immense, a living shadow that couldn't fit within reality. The air trembled and the ground bent beneath its weight. Its voice exploded inside me. "Now, Elias, break the chains." My hands moved on their own. The metal cross burned against my chest until it melted. Chains shattered like paper. The prelates' screams echoed, not in fear but in ecstasy. They believed they would be rewarded. But what came next was not power. It was hunger. The Primordial consumed them in seconds, reducing bodies and souls to dust. The soldiers fled, but even the elevator couldn't save them. Everything around me twisted, sucked into him. I stood, unharmed, with the melted chains in my hands. "You are my herald," the voice said, "and the world will be my feast." When I awoke, I was back in my apartment. The clock was stopped, and Lorian's note was still in my pocket. But in the mirror, my reflection was no longer just me. The eyes that watched me were the Primordials, and they were smiling.